Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a Snowmass Village Town Council meeting. Mayor Butler is running a bit late and asked me to get the meeting started. So Barb, would you take roll, please?
Alyssa, Bill,
Here.
Marky, Bob,
Here.
and Tom.
Here.
Okay, so the first thing on our agenda tonight is a discussion relative to the Little Red Schoolhouse, potential expansion. Scott, are you going to present that, or Julianne, you presenting?
I'll just give a quick brief, and I'll give it over to Scott here, just so the council
Okay.
knows. A while back, the Little Red approached the town about potential and some options with some expansion. I know they've been working through a number of different ideas and thoughts, and maybe a month or so ago, we thought it'd be a good idea for let the Little Red and Scott, as the president, come and speak to the council as landlords of the property. The town owns the property, leases it for $1 a year, and then this would be a good opportunity for the tenant, the nonprofit, to speak to the landlord, make sure the tenant's getting everybody up to speed on what might be going on, and then for you guys to give some direction from there. So that's why we're here tonight.
Okay. Hi, Scott.
How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sure, tell us what's going on.
Well, I think we kind of spelled it out in the letter, and hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read it. But the thing we're looking for is we're looking to expand Little Red Schoolhouse. As some of you who are family people, things may know, that childcare in the Roaring Fork Valley is reaching kind of a crisis level. Our demographics are dramatically changing. There's tons of families that are moving into the area with children. There's lots of people who have lived here for years that are having children, and trying to get into childcare situations is very difficult. A perfect example is my oldest daughter, 2 years ago when she was still pregnant, put her name on the waiting list at the ELC in town, which happens to be the latest iteration of a nonprofit organization that my wife and I actually helped start. And even with that kind of status, it still took over a year for her to be able to get my grandson in, and even then they could only get in on limited basis, and have slowly built up to the amount of time that they really need to make it profitable for them to continue to work. So we need to have more opportunities and more spaces for childcare in the Roaring Fork Valley. That being said, we've got some ideas of how to do some expansion at the Little Red Schoolhouse, but one of the first things that we need to try and look for some guidance from you guys, and we want to again thank you as our landlords. You guys have pretty much made Little Red Schoolhouse what it is. We would like to have a little bit of guidance as to what you guys also see as the future of Little Red Schoolhouse. We've got some ideas of how to do expansion on the property that we're currently at, but we've been getting some mixed signals as to where the town would like to see Little Red Schoolhouse in the future as far as a location. One of the sites that has been talked about a couple of different times is having us actually move down into the vicinity of the rec center, and trying to get it nailed down would really help us in being able to try and plan for the future, to then bring plans to you guys as to what kind of expansion we would like to have. We do have some ideas that we would love to give you on which property we think would be better, but at the same time we also want to see if you guys have something already in mind for us that we're unaware of.
Okay. Well, interesting to me that, you brought that up, because I was thinking about that too when I read the letter, and honestly wasn't sure if, or how aware you were and the board was as to these other discussions. Honestly, I don't think we've really I tried to address that at this table, at least to my recollection. So I guess I would like to hear, your thoughts about the both sites, and that might give us a place to start.
Okay. The discussions that we've been having as a board, and Robin is the director, she's come in now too. We've looked at both the sites, and given the opportunity, we would prefer to stay at the site that we're currently at. And a couple of the reasons for that is all based on safety. Obviously, in today's society, school safety is a big hot topic item, but it's something that we've always considered to be a priority at Little Red Schoolhouse. And the site that we're currently at is one that is manageable. We have enough room on the property to do the kinds of expansions that we're hoping to be able to do. And it doesn't put us in a situation where it may be difficult to actually maintain a realistic perimeter around the school. If we were to move down to a much more public area down by the rec center, we literally have public open spaces that are actively being used by a wide variety of different people 360 degrees all the way around the school, which could make it very, very difficult for the administrators as well as the instructors and teachers to keep track of people coming and going in and out of the school itself. Where we're at, we've got a fairly enclosed area. It's easily monitored by the teachers and things like that. One way in, one way out. It just makes it a little bit safer in general. Another item about moving down to the rec center is it would put us in close proximity to the rodeo. I don't have a problem with the rodeo. I don't think anyone does. But from a safety standpoint, we are all well aware that there is a health situation going on in the United States right now that is climbing rapidly, and that's childhood allergies. Most of them are foodborne, but a lot of them, another rapid rise that we're seeing is in allergies to animals and animal dander. We currently have 2 children at school right now that would not be able to be enrolled if we were in that close proximity to the rodeo. So there's just not trying to say that we absolutely can't be down there by any means, but we are looking at the fact that the site that we're at now is going to support the expansion that we're looking for. It would support it fairly easily, and it wouldn't add into the situation of some of these other safety concerns that we have with the other site. The last point, and this isn't necessarily for the site, but just go ahead and put it out there since it is kind of under the guise of safety as well, is when we do get into discussions about expansion, one of the things that we would like to approach the town on is the question about employee housing and a requirement for that. That's also a little bit of a safety concern for us as the board. If we are required to have employee housing actually within the school on the site, it also creates that situation where we may end up having to rent it to people that are going to be very difficult for us to vet and to have an appropriate vetting process for their background as to having them actually living in a daycare situation. That's a really odd circumstance that I don't think daycares across the country have to deal with, and it's something that we just wanted to put out there and just at least have on your radar for the future. That could be a very, very awkward safety situation for us as well.
Thank you.
And I would just add, when we've talked to staff, we agree. We think that staying where it's at seems to make a lot of sense. I think that the confusion, the comp plan, which is sitting up here, talks about a potential to move it. But, you know, the fact that it's under control, all the issues that Scott talked about, we understand, and that's why we're here tonight supporting the ideas being put forth.
Bill, Tommy, any comments, thoughts?
I'm just curious to know what your expansion plans look like on the site.
Glad you asked.
Robin has some copies of just some rough ideas of what we're looking for, but in general, what we're looking, and she can give you a little bit more detail, but in general, we're looking for an opportunity to expand the facility to allow for infant care. We currently don't have that capability right now, and that is one of the fastest growing parts of daycare in the valley is people needing infant care. Expand our toddler care. Same kind of thing. As those infants grow up, you're going to move into the toddler care. And then our preschool opportunities would expand as well. It gives us an ability to actually have an area for larger group activities, which we don't have right now. Everything is kind of confined to individual classrooms. The existing building that is there right now, we would build a new building that would have the smaller classroom opportunities, and the existing building that we have, the Red Schoolhouse itself, would then be turned into something that can be used in a larger activity level, that we can do science and music and library and dance and a variety of different things that we're currently doing on a very small scale. Because of the cramped quarters, we would be able to expand those and be able to use that facility in a much more efficient manner. It also would give us the prospect in the existing building downstairs to have an area for our teachers to be able to do professional development, have a variety of computers. A lot of the instructional things that our teachers are progressing through as they are, after they're hired, they progress through a variety of different levels to improve their capabilities to meet some of the different standards in the state and also with some of the overseeing agencies. They have to do it all on their own computers during break, on laptops and things like that. We'd actually be able to have some sort of a professional development area where they would be able to do their continuing education there at the school in a much more realistic manner.
Greg, can you just walk us through the map that you just?
Actually, I
I'm
think
gonna-
I'll turn over to Robin at
Okay.
this
Turn
point.
and I'm going to turn that over to Dustin. He's the one who drew this up for us, so.
Hi, I'm Dustin Anderson. Been helping out with some pre-planning for the Little Red. Essentially what we're looking at is to try to come with the most simple approach. Okay.
So everybody can see it.
All right.
Little
Might take it a second.
technology pause here, sorry.
Oh, look how cute.
Lean over your shoulder.
It should be.
Projector.
No, do you know how to do this?
Why it's not, it's on
Here, I'll move. Yes, please.
computer.
Yeah, sorry. Should have thought this one.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be real easy. Turn on and it's supposed to just go.
If everything was so easy.
This is the focus.
I'll tell you what. You guys talk. I'll go get IT.
Yeah, Doug's right outside. Is there a projector here?
Something's occurring.
Well, Julianne, you have your computer on.
I know, but don't you just
Turn
have
off
to
your
turn the,
computer. You can't see it.
don't I just turn off the air media over there?
Talk amongst yourselves.
Now we're all set.
There we go.
Yay.
There you go, what a concept.
See, Doug, we needed you. And I wasn't here.
Oops.
Now we see you.
Okay.
You kind of wouldn't want to move it too much. So,
Just trying to get it.
That's really good.
yeah.
There we are.
That's good enough.
It's smaller one might work better. Okay. This is good enough for everybody to
Can't read
Yeah,
it.
that's
get
good.
an idea.
Wherever
Yeah.
the cursor is, I can't read that.
I'll use my pen here.
We need new glasses.
I do.
You,
Can you read that?
you can use the mouse.
$15,000 lenses, yes.
Should be able to
There
mouse
we
over
are.
there.
Okay. So down at the bottom of the page is the street where we currently access. So the access
Mike,
is.
I can't hear you.
Can you?
How we doing?
Perfect.
Thanks, Doug.
So down at the bottom of the page is where the current access is. So we've continued with the layout for fire emergency access. Right here is the original Little Red Schoolhouse. And so what we're looking at is a 2-story element currently. This shaded area is a 5,000 square foot footprint. Generally, we might think of 1,000, 1,200 square feet gross per classroom. And then we would have up to 3 outdoor areas that would be for play, and each would have equipment geared towards specific age groups. And that would allow for everybody to be outside at the same time, which is also a benefit too. So this is the adjacent park. So we're really not planning on anything over here permanently, except for potentially expanding the parking slightly, just to provide more. And
Just clarify for me, the proposed new building, I didn't get, is it 1,000 square feet per floor or 1,000 total?
this is a 5,000 square foot footprint that's
Okay.
that's shaded. The we're still in the programming phase, I would say, to understand what we want to do. I think we wanted to just come to you first to
Okay.
So
you guys
the new parking area in front, that's where the playground is, the fenced-in playground, correct?
correct.
So then, I still can't read that little white square. That's the existing building,
Yes,
right where the cursor is now,
correct.
correct? Okay, so that's the Little Red Schoolhouse. Okay, I can't read, it's so tiny, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Even with my glasses, I can't read it.
So, Robin, in terms of infant care, the state regs, what age is considered infant, and what's your ratio for teacher to infant?
So infant care, we can take them as young as like, got all the mics.
Okay, how do you,
Robin, Mike,
You're not gonna be able to hear me either way, I don't think.
you got a little problem there with that voice. Oh, gosh.
I know, this is like chronic with me.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so for infant care, we were thinking, and the way that we wanted to kind of deal with this building was, we were gonna try and do one solid room for infant care,
Okay.
one solid room for pre-K, and then we were gonna do 3 what we call flex rooms, so that if we managed to have like a ton of infants, but then turn into a ton of toddlers, we can actually use that room and
That'd be
flex that
flex.
room so that that room can then become a larger group of toddlers. You know what I mean? And then get the smaller group of infants. So then our infant, I believe they take them as young as 8 weeks.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes, they take them as
Yeah.
young as 8 weeks.
Right.
We are currently at a year, and our ratio would follow the same as state. It's well, they say 1 to 3, but I say 1 to 2.
That's about right.
I would think that, yeah, I mean, that's an awful lot of stuff to do for little people. I would prefer for the ratios to be smaller, as we've kind of
Right.
been able to keep that smaller in our space right now. We've got our preschool right now. You should have 1 to 10 ratio. Right now, we're at about a 1 to 6 with the number of staff that we have on site. And then same with our toddler center. It's supposed to be 1 to 5. Ours is about 1 to 2.5, 3.
Another quick question. Have you done a feasibility study yet in terms of the growth curve for the kids?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
So, Robin, where would, since your new parking lot is in front, where would you locate, I can't read the writing, I'm sorry. Where would the new playground, I see the area for the little kids,
Up there,
So
up there.
the
The
bigger
2
kids are in the back.
the big kids are,
Yeah,
okay.
pre-K and toddler would be in the back, so that eliminates the need for the playground that's up front, and that way we can turn it into the parking, because we'll just move all the rest of that stuff behind the building. Pretty much where the toddler center sits now, I think, is basically what that would look like. That's pretty much what we're planning on it being.
Yes, This area is rather flat, as is down behind Little Red. Perfect.
Maybe.
So that 5,000 square foot you're proposing could be expanded, if need be, to perhaps to the east,
Yes.
if it's
The
east-west.
East is over here,
Well, you know.
west is over here.
East.
Pick a direction, yes.
Yeah.
That's one direction it could go.
So
Okay.
we have there's a wetland area
Uh-huh.
here, so we are kind of held by that.
Mhm.
The thought of placing the building where the steep slope is that the building would take up where that slope is, and we would have a flat spot at the top
Yeah,
and at the bottom.
I just want it to be large enough over the next 15, 20 years. Bill, you had a question?
So is the intent to connect it to the current toddler center?
The current toddler center would go away.
Oh, it would.
It was a gifted building originally.
How would you deal with the wetlands? Because I've been up there, and it's a challenge for the people that are living there, with Meadowwood, and it's,
Sinclair Meadows. yeah,
how,
access.
because you're awfully close to it. And I know there, between breeding mosquitoes and everything else that they get in the summertime up there, I've done a home inspection up there, and it was a mess, and they actually deferred the property because of the wetlands, the people did. So that was back in April or May.
Where we're at right now doesn't.
It doesn't bother you because
It
it's
hasn't
downhill?
bothered us at all. I mean, we actually have, I feel like, especially on the other side of the toddler center, I feel like we have like 15, 20 feet on the other side of us before we even hit that little drainage space there. So, I mean, we're not as close as you'd like to think necessarily.
So this is the border here. So this is what's platted as wetland area. So diagrammatically, we might be close, but once we develop the plan, it would be sensitive to this area.
Yeah, and we've managed to kind of coexist with all the craziness up there. I mean, we've got moose in our space right now. We have a deer that lives back there. Like, we've managed to kind of figure ourselves out in that space as is. So, I mean, I think we feel fairly comfortable, although I have to admit, it was when I got the picture of the moose being like in the backyard, I thought, oh my gosh, we started doing like lockdown drills as soon as we could, because I was like, I have no idea what she's planning on doing, because she's the one with the twins that's in our backyard right now. So I thought, oh gracious, run drills just in case we need to get the kids inside as quickly as possible. But those are all adaptations that we've made for a number of years, and it's really quite funny because the deer that lives right behind in the wetlands area by the preschool, she's had her babies there every year since I've been there, and literally, like, our kids can stand on the top of our slide and see the mama deer with all the baby deers, and so it's kind of a cool experience for the kids,
Yeah.
when we use it as a teaching thing instead of being like, oh my gosh, just keep you out of this area. We've been kind of using it as a way to teach as well.
That's wonderful.
So you'd move the play areas to where the existing toddler center is?
Yeah, that toddler center was actually the old Alpine Bank building before the Alpine Bank building was built, and it was gifted to us when Shirley Ritter was the director in like 88 or 89. So that building has been used for a number of years. I mean, even though the original school building looks like it's older, I imagine the toddler center is probably just as old, because I don't remember when that Alpine Bank building was put up, but it was quite, it was a decent time ago. And so chances are, it's kind of funny, everybody, because when we originally started this project, we thought about adding on to the toddler center, and Shirley was like, you could blow on it, it would probably fall over. So it just didn't make sense. We thought starting over might be, more practical at that point for the long term.
And the mold remediation that you did, I guess, a year ago, was that due to the wetlands, or was that another source?
Nope, that was actually in the preschool building, and it was something totally random. I think something had happened with the dishwasher down at the preschool building. When it got put in, some of the lines were leaking, and it leaked water into the wall between the kitchen and the bathroom. And so we just had it there, got it fixed, and we haven't had problems with it since.
I have a question. Clint, maybe you can answer this. Where would the new community garden fit into this scheme here? Because
On
They're
the
on the
left,
other side of us right
the
now.
left side of that walking path they've got proposed.
okay, so that's
It's
not
over
going to
here.
interfere with it.
Yeah,
I think it's a little further.
it's further, it's
It's a little
closer.
further west, but
Okay.
Yeah.
we're trying to say, hey, you guys kind of stay where we've got it. We're trying to work together to make sure that all fits.
Okay.
So, I don't know if it was during Planapalooza or a previous conversation about Town Park Station. Wasn't there a notion to move Little Red Schoolhouse down to,
It
okay,
was-
so I wasn't dreaming this up.
No,
No, actually, we sort of covered that
Oh, I'm
before
sorry,
you
okay.
got here.
Well,
No, that's
I
okay.
enjoyed the canyon view coming in from
Good,
Vail
good.
today.
Good.
It was a notion, but I think we all agree that this site is better.
This really is a much better site. So the request today is to direct staff?
Yeah, so this is really kind of an opening introduction.
Yeah.
And then what we're suggesting is that you guys direct staff to, we'll prepare a resolution that you guys can more formally support this. And that way clear up some of these decisions about what's been talked about. And these guys can at least have a piece of paper from the town saying, as landlords, we're supportive of these expansion efforts. And we'll put some language in there. But that way, they got something a little bit more formal saying, we understand what you're looking at and we can agree to that. And then they can use that however they need to from there.
I personally think it's a wonderful community asset, and we just need to move towards success. I think that we all need to be open-minded relative to 5,000 square feet as you work through a feasibility. I'm going to assume you're going to do one to really try to nail this for the next 20 years, but I'm very supportive and would like to suggest we move forward directing staff to prepare a resolution accordingly.
I just have another question.
Oh, okay.
If that, with the neighbors next door, have they been approached yet in regards to an expansion with that amount of vehicles and that kind of activity? And
right.
is that something we need to consider?
I mean, I imagine it's something that we need to consider. However, most of the people who live behind us have kids that come to us. So a majority of those people will probably be like, oh my gosh, yes, because a lot of the people who live behind us, I mean, I've got people on my wait list who are like, this is ridiculous. I live behind you.
Right.
I work in Snowmass, and yet I bring my child into Aspen for daycare. So, I mean, yes, while it might be the inconvenience of the construction and all the rest of it, I feel like, yeah, I mean,
And a lot of
clearly
that
we
can be
should.
addressed through the planning effort, through the land use
Right,
process.
I
So-
understand.
so it's-
I mean, because
you
it's
guys
a
have better
very
work
large
to do.
parking lot, and with that kind of activity early in the morning, and when the days are shorter in the afternoon, when we get a lot of snow like we used to, I don't know
if we
how we're
again.
gonna handle the vehicles coming and going in the activity on Elk Creek Road. So anyway, it's something in the planning could handle,
Good point.
Clint, did we ever consider the school site as a relocation?
For this project?
Yeah.
No, honestly. I mean, in my short time of doing this,
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that site because I grew up here and I've heard about this site for a number of years, but it was never something that we'd actually ever, because when we went to Planapalooza thing, we either just saw our site or the rodeo lot space, the rec center area. I'd never really considered it because isn't that kind of out of the way? I mean, not that it's a huge deal, but that's kind of up that draw, isn't it, between
Yeah, you have to get a
the
road in
rodeo
there.
and Melton One,
Right.
right?
there'd be some
Right.
infrastructure issues and, I mean, the short answer is no. We've kind of talked about these two and just thought this one, because it's up and working, it seemed to make sense.
In a prior council, Bill, you weren't on council then, there was another school that came in and did a proposal to go up into the school site. And there was a lot of negative comments by the community on that. So to me, it would be a little political,
Firestorm?
difficult for you
Yeah.
to sell it, even though everybody loves the Little Red Schoolhouse. I mean, you could probably sell it, but it would cause a lot of community
Well,
angst.
a lot
And
of
if this
the-
site were constrained, I mean, if they couldn't fit what they wanted, I think that would probably spark that next discussion. But as far as the discussions we've had, it seems to fit where they're aiming for. So that's probably another reason we didn't go exploring a lot of other options.
as well, because like, you know, when you talk to a lot of the kind of like older time, like community members, a lot of them express that they're like, but that's Little Red. You know what I mean? Like they were like, where would you go to? It's if you move, it's still, you know, it's less Little Red, which I mean, you could easily put the building there and it would be the same. But, you know, a lot of the parents here have, I mean, I was too old to have gone here. But you know, kids who were just younger than I was were sent here and their kids have gone through here. So like nostalgia wise, I feel like it's one of those things where it's just like, people just kind of have a fondness for where it's at.
So,
Yeah, I'm fine.
you're fine?
I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Are you fine directing staff?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
So
let's-
we'll aim to have it back on the 20th unless we need it sooner, but we'll get something put together and bring it back for a more formal consideration.
It's wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Congratulations.
guys so much.
Good luck
Yeah,
with the
thank you.
plans.
Thank you.
Next is a consent agenda. Let me pull it up.
Or public comment.
Oh,
you have any.
we haven't done any public
No,
comment.
because this was before
this is-
public comment.
Okay, do I have anyone here this evening who would like to do a public comment? Seeing no hands go up, we will move on into consent agenda. And there are draft agendas in the packet on page 14. Let me pull that up. Do I have a motion for approval for the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a lot on this agenda. A lot of topics. I think that one of the items we want to keep consistent all through August and maybe even September was the comp plan just as a placeholder. We talked about that 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago.
But we were gonna see how far you got tonight, and we can absolutely add that. Just to jump ahead for a second, but the planning commission got through the majority of the plan in one meeting. We hope to have hope to have their recommendation to you on that 6th, August 6th. So at that point, it'll be up to you guys how often you wanna meet and discuss it. But a
I
little bit of-
I wonder if we should have a joint meeting on August 6th, whether we have a recommendation or not, just to see if we're on the same page or where we're not on the same page. And I guess I'd prefer to do it, I would prefer to do it face-to-face with the planning commission rather than working off of working off of their resolution with, their potential issues.
And our hope is to have a presentation from the chair here for that.
How about we just do a joint meeting? And then whoever's the chair could do the presentation.
Patrick Kelty.
Yeah, Patrick. And then we could ask questions of the commissioners.
I would obviously prefer that you follow the code, but you can do what you want.
Yeah, John, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you either. You prefer what?
I prefer that you follow the code, which does not provide for a joint meeting at this point.
But is it an option? It's always an option.
Sure.
So we're talking about the comprehensive plan. And on August the 6th, we would see the draft presented by the Planning Commission, by the chair. And there's a notion that it might be helpful to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to really look at the comp plan. One of the reasons why I would anticipate some people might be interested is it's a pretty significant document, many pages, many appendices, and questions may arise. It'd be a public session. So what's the pleasure of council?
What would be the objection of having a joint? I mean, I think their feedback at that same time has always been helpful to me. When I was on planning, I also thought it was helpful to give our point to council at that time and to be invited to a planned meeting. Thank you.
I think the nuance is a joint meeting versus them presenting at your meeting, and I'm thinking, that's where my brain's at. It's your public hearing, that's what the code calls for. You can invite whoever you'd like to come and present and discuss with at that public hearing, and so as long as you're having a public hearing and we know that the planning commission's invited to come and present, I'm assuming that would meet your ends or what you're hoping for that discussion, but we're not calling it a formal joint meeting. They're just here to present their findings at that point, and you can have that discussion.
Because the chair is going to be presenting anyway.
It'll be the
He's gonna
town
be-
council
right.
meeting that the planning commission would be presenting
So-
at. And so it's a little nuance, but
Well,
that's,
And to be clear, he's not going to be presenting a draft. The hearing draft has been prepared. They are reviewing, they being the planning commission, are reviewing that, and they're going to submit a written recommendation on that. They are not redrafting the plan again. So there's a nuance there as well. So when you say he's presenting a draft, the draft is out in the public domain at present for everyone to read, and it will not change as a result of the planning commission carrying on their concurrent review of that draft.
So are you suggesting that we can't ask questions of the members of the planning commission? No.
Nope, never said
Okay.
that.
Because the appendices, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of material, a lot of meat in this revision of the comp plan. It's pretty darn well done, it's pretty well complete, but there's always questions as you begin to go through the final resolution.
and we're guessing that they're gonna get it done in the next meeting or two. I mean, just the way they got this last one. And it'll be a resolution from the planning commission, hopefully recommending adoption with 23 changes made, or recommended to make, or whatever that number is.
Okay.
And they'll outline it, and they'll say, here's what we thought worked well, here's some recommendations for changes that they're proposing.
But if we were to do it that way, are we encouraging all the members or other members besides the president, the chair, to come to the meeting on the 6th?
I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could.
I think it'd be great to have the members of,
And I would like as
task
many,
force.
as many members, yeah, of the.
The task
of the-
force
Of the think tank and the and the planning commission, as well as the public, to be here and hear it and be involved in a discussion. I mean, we've done these things in sort of sections where, each of these groups has kind of looked at this thing, independently. And I would like the opportunity to maybe share thoughts and share ideas. I mean, I read the think tank notes. I mean, there are things that I would like to talk to people about and questions that arose from those notes. And we've really, I don't think we've really had the opportunity to meet as a cohesive group, with all the groups involved
and the community.
and the community.
So I think it'd be wonderful to have, more people involved in the process of governance and determination of the strategic direction of this town, the better we're all served. This is a significant document, and it's a guiding document for future councils. I think it's absolutely critical we get as many people here as we possibly can.
But we can do that without calling it a joint meeting, right?
Oh, yeah, we just invite everybody,
That's right. That's the nuance.
encourage attendance.
And there'll be, if the adoption process for the council is via ordinance, so you'll have a first reading, you'll have a second reading, you can take input through the entire process, and it's up to you, as the council, decide how quickly, you want to go through that. So if the first reading, we just have one body, and the second reading more show up, and you continue to get feedback, it's up to you on how long you want to keep the hearing going, and when you want to vote. It's at your speed.
So looking at the draft agendas, when we get into September, there are many religious holidays
Yeah,
on
we
these meeting dates.
I'm
Is,
not exactly sure if that's right. We had this discussion last week. We need to do a little double checking to make sure some of these dates
we need
are.
to know if all council will be present. Bob, which one of these?
Well, I would check the dates too, but I think I would not be here on the 10th, and there's a good chance I won't be here on the 17th. I'll actually be out of town on the 17th.
So should we change the meeting on the 10th?
For Rosh Hashanah, that's the one I think that we might have had the date wrong on that. I think we were
It's
talking.
also a
through-
work session, it's not regular.
Oh, work session, okay.
Rosh Hashanah on the calendar.
Yeah, I know, but I remember we thought we made a mistake.
And you're out of town for Yom Kippur?
Yes, at this point, I am planning to be out of town for Yom Kippur. Let me see something.
How about you, Bill? You here?
August the,
I'm hoping to be
What?
out of
August
town
20th?
sometime in September,
In September, for the religious holidays during that
the end
season.
of September. And
Where-
I'm hoping to be out of town maybe the
Rosh
last week of
Hashanah
September
begins
and
the evening of
the first
September
week of
9th and
October,
ends in
so
the
I don't
evening
know.
of
Okay.
September 11th.
I haven't set my plan yet.
so are we talking about using the work session on the 10th?
Well, if that's Rosh Hashanah, that's a holiday, we may have to
And it's
change
a
it.
public hearing, so you need to try and stay to the two regular meetings.
Well, we need to make sure we have quorum.
Yes.
And I don't know what Alyssa's schedule is.
Yom Kippur is it?
No.
I'm
Right.
trying to,
Wednesday.
It's Yom Kippur that I think we've got wrong on this. I think that starts Tuesday, the 18th.
yeah.
So,
I have it as Wednesday, Thursday, the 19th and 20th.
and this is where we,
Well, we'll ask you to do a little bit of homework. How would that be?
I'm looking
Yom
it up.
Kippur starts on the evening of September 18th, Tuesday, and ends in the evening of Wednesday, September 19th
Okay,
in 2018. But those are not council meeting dates.
No.
Rosh Hashanah starts Sunday evening and ends Tuesday evening
it's a work session.
over
So-
the 10th, which is a work session.
So it would
But the
affect,
17th would be a regular meeting.
right. And I would be here on the work session, but I don't think I will be here on the 17th.
Which begs another question. When do we have to have the ballot language done?
September 7th.
Oh, boy. September 7th, okay.
7th.
7th, well, the latest,
The last meeting before that is the Tuesday after Labor Day, the 4th.
okay? Okay,
So without a special meeting, you'd want to have that completed by September 4th. It's not uncommon when legislative body, when councils or boards of trustees are putting ballot questions on, that they do end up doing it at a special meeting the day before. So that's not uncommon.
we may need to do that, plan for a special meeting. We are already planning one for RAFTA.
whenever you guys want, we'll just tell us how you want to.
Why don't we do a placeholder? Monday, the 27th of August, perhaps?
Yeah, I suppose we could do that. I mean,
I
from my
just get a
perspective.
placeholder. It's better to cancel a meeting than, if we have all the work done, then it won't be necessary. It'd just be a special meeting around ballot language. Are you good?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get it done before that.
Yeah, we all.
So ballot language and comprehensive plan?
You could put the comp plan on there if everybody's going to be here, but let's,
That date again is,
27th.
August 27th.
They can do it, but if you're fortunate enough to complete the ballot language before then, and you're advertising it, that it will be a comp plan as well, you may very well be forced to have that meeting even if you finish the ballot language and do comp plan work.
Well, why don't we just reserve it for ballot language right now? Okay. Okay. We have a motion, we have a second with a modification. Any other item on the agenda or the draft agendas that you'd like to discuss? Okay, all in support, say aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Okay. Next is continue the, we're gonna move into the camp plan. And Julianne, you've got it up on the board, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and continue the public hearing.
Reopen it.
Reopen the public
Continue it
hearing,
at the
yes.
end.
Reopen the comp plan discussion, and the agenda for today's is on page 17 of your packet. Okay, Julianne?
All right, we have, in the staff memo to you, I just responded to the direction we heard from the first meeting on July 2nd. I tried to summarize that. Those included bringing forward the 2010 policy related to affordable housing. Generally, the CPAs were found to be acceptable. There was some discussion around some aspects of the CPAs, but for the most part, the text was found to be acceptable. There was agreement that we didn't really want to put future CPAs on the map, but that perhaps we would include language that would require an extra level of review, perhaps through a pre-sketch process for anyone who would be doing development outside of the designated 3 CPA areas. And then the last one was related to the community facilities and institutional areas, the purple ones that show up on the map. And there was agreement that we really didn't need to further discuss those, but at least label those on the map so everybody knew what those locations, what those sites encompass. So since your meeting on the 2nd, we did have a meeting with the think tank. Both Marky and Bill were in attendance at that. Generally, the think tank was provided pretty good feedback. I think they thought that the organization was pretty well done. They liked that it was condensed quite a bit. And so they brought forward just a couple of specific recommendations for council to consider, including the fact that just understand that this is a moment in time and that things do change, and that this is intended to be a guiding document. So I think that town council understands that. But they also suggested that that an updated workforce study should be completed, and that is one of our next step items that is drafted in this draft plan. And then last Wednesday, we met with the Planning Commission, and they got through, they all commented about what they generally thought of the draft plan, because this was the first time that they were seeing it as well. And then we went through the first 55 pages of it, and there was very minor, quite honestly, very minor changes that they put forth. I thought that they were very good suggestions, but nothing that was, you know, a wholesale, we don't need this section or anything like that. They stopped at the appendices with the expectation that they're going to pick up that topic again this Wednesday and try and get through as much of that as they can. And we have a placeholder meeting on the 25th if they can't get through on the 18th. But we did draft a resolution for their consideration that had all the changes that they had suggested. to date, and so we would presume that we'll be going through the same procedure on Wednesday through the appendices. I will note that one of the discussion items that we had at the Planning Commission, one of the suggestions was that perhaps the reflections section, which is really the bulk of the appendices, which is, you know, more or less our existing conditions, one of the planning commissioners felt strongly that perhaps we didn't really need that, and perhaps our community profile could sit in there instead, which is a 12-page document. That a lot of this information was copied into this reflection section. So that's where we're at with the process. And so tonight, we don't have any specific questions for you to give us direction on, but we just thought it would be good to open up the discussion and see if there's specific items that you feel really need to be further discussed at this point.
I just had a question that came to me after the think tank, as I was thinking through the discussion the other day. What percentage of our employees are we currently housing?
I believe it's about 48%, but it's in that range.
I was going to say, I can get a whole number. We can dig up a whole number.
When we updated the plan from 10 years ago, we put the new numbers in there. It's about 48, it might be 50, I can't recall exactly, but we were about 10% short of meeting that 60% goal.
Okay.
I'm rounding numbers.
And do we know the type of housing those individuals, the other 10%, might desire, or do they even want to live here? Do we know?
We have not done an additional study.
So if we update that study and have Chris Cares and his team to come back in and repeat that study, we could really garner the information. If our goal is 60%, if we could possibly find out what's the notion, what type of housing do they want? I mean, I don't know. And I don't know how many square feet that might take of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, et cetera, and we are pretty well landlocked, so I'm of the opinion we need to get that study done, and I did discuss it last week at the task force.
There is on page 101 that I don't know if this is part of the study, that the minimum of 448 square feet per full-time employee. That's in the
That's a
appendix.
studio.
That's
That's
a
in the,
studio, right.
yeah, that's a land use
So-
code.
Right.
So,
So,
go ahead.
I was just saying, I've got that highlighted in regards to the question you asked, we already have that.
You only have it for a studio, you don't have it,
No, I don't have it for,
You did.
no, we don't have it for.
People
We
with
have
families.
minimum requirements for what we construct and what we have as mitigation. I mean, I think as far as trying to figure out the demand, I think we're comfortable saying that, I mean, and I think some of the pushback we've gotten throughout this process is you're never going to fulfill the demand. There's always going to be more demand than there is ability to fulfill. And that's why I think the way that goal is crafted as 60% of the year-round workforce is something that could potentially be achievable. And it's not on demand because that's one of those things that's not going to ever get filled. We know that, no matter what. If we built 353 units tomorrow, there would be demand for the 354th unit the next day. And that's why I think that goal is articulated that way is a lot more achievable and
what type of, but Clint, my question is, what type of units are we talking about? All studios?
No.
No, and the
And it's a
plan is,
variety of housing types.
yeah, the plan is pretty clear that we want to have as much variety as possible in housing available to employees. So it could be everything from single family to studios.
But in this workforce study that we want to have, I feel it would be important to find out if people are looking for rental property, they're looking for ownership. It's a different, it's a different structure, it's a different it's a different project.
Sure.
So, you know, I know in the past, Clint, you've said, well, we're gonna build what we can build, and that kind of has a domino effect, so if we move people out of rental into ownership, we can fill rentals, and that's okay on, you know, a small project of 20 or 30 townhomes, that we're considering. But if we really are gonna try to make an impact into what we think we need, and this study will hopefully prove out, we're gonna need to make larger projects in terms of more units.
Yes.
And then we need to know, I think it's more important to know if it's rental, should rental have priority, or should ownership have priority?
I agree. I mean, if we're gonna, at the 20 to 30 units, we know, we're confident we can fill whatever those are.
I understand.
And you're talking about, if we had that 100-unit home run, yeah, we would absolutely have to do a lot more market analysis. We've done some, if you remember last year when we did the rodeo, and the survey work we did last year, we started that process, so I think we have a high level of confidence what we're proposing is gonna work. But the idea of, you know, do we know the numbers of ones, the numbers of twos, the numbers of studios today? If you believe that 60% number, if you believe that 350-ish number, no, we couldn't tell you the exact split today. But we're confident in the number. We think that's the right number.
Well, let me ask you this, just to throw a little bit more consideration. 5.5 on page 42 talks about something that I've talked about for years, and that's bring an aging care facility and/or senior housing to Snowmass Village. Then we talk about, this would be a graduated care facility, a CCRC, within the core area of Snowmass Village. We've done no work in terms of determining the number of each one of the product types for that type of a program, nor do I think that we have adequate number of residents in Snowmass Village who would want to move in that type of facility. Because there's critical mass one has to have. To me, this is it would be better to look at senior housing in concert with our colleagues at Pitkin County and Aspen.
I happen to agree with that, because I can't, right now I have so many friends who are having breathing issues because of the elevation here.
Right.
And I just can't see having a graduated care facility where, at an elevation that already creates, you know, respiratory issues.
And honestly, I'll be really frank. This came up because the direction we thought last time was make sure it's addressed, and we're thinking about it, and so it's in here. And if there's been a change in thought process, okay.
No, I think you leave it in here. I'm in agreement we need to leave it here, but we don't have the critical mass for.
Well, I don't think it belongs in the core area of Snowmass Village.
No, it doesn't. Doesn't belong in the core area. Because people will want recreational paths and a variety of amenities. It's better, I don't want to get into how to plan a CCRC, because that's not the purpose tonight. The purpose is to make sure it has a placeholder for consideration and planning with, to me, with other stakeholders within our community, and that would be the county. And there is some land at a lower elevation that could be considered. And would be on a raft to stop.
And the two goals over, and I'm gonna find the page here in a second, but one of the goals, and I wish I could put my finger on it, Julianne will help me when I start talking, but it talks about working with local, regional, and state partners.
Yes,
So
yes.
if you said, hey, this could be, we could put that in that type discussion, it's important. We might not be able to deliver on it, but we need other partners to help us deliver on it. That's that's language I'm sure we could put.
You know,
together.
you could leave, it may be desirable that in the future, maybe 80 years from now, you might want a CCRC here as systems improve in terms of respiratory support, supportive devices, as pretty significant changes have occurred in the market over the last few years. But still, I think, I do like the idea, Clan, of moving this with regional partners, but I do think this needs to have some consideration within a strategic initiative. And second one, when we go back to the number of affordable housing, the seniors need to have a mix within that consideration, not just workforce housing, but housing for people as they age in place in a community.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, our housing regulations allow for that now. I mean, once you own a unit and you've worked 10 years, you can retire in that unit. And so that's some regulations you'll see.
Well, you want to have single floors, single stories, no stairs. I'm not aware that much of our product inventory that is solely owned or owned.
I don't know too many ranch-style houses in Snowmass Village.
Well, that's the reason why you may want to build a building, and, you know, you got kind of an apartment building, and you have elevators and parking garages, and
And I think, I mean, just broadly speaking, that variety of housing types, if you go back to the overall goal that it talks about, it specifically talks about inclusiveness, it specifically talks about variety, and I think that's where that terminology came from, is those kind of discussions, is we've got to make sure that there's the discussion of, is this workforce housing or is it community building housing? And I think the answer came back, it's a combination. It's workforce first, and by building a good workforce, you build community. And that community then has folks that age, and a product needs to be allowed for those folks as well.
just to make sure, they may choose to move out their wholly owned home into a rental.
If it's private, if it's a free market, for sure.
No. Housing, part of the workforce, see, I don't see workforce housing as workforce housing. I see it housing the individuals that live in your community. They may work here, they may not. You've got all the asset limitations on your workforce housing. The thought is, okay, someone that lives down in Rodeo Place. Let's say now they are 75 years of age, and they have difficulty going up and down stairs without oxygen support, and it's really a pain in the derriere, if you will, for the people to go up and down in terms of stairs, and also when they walk out of their houses to slip and fall. It would be, my consideration would be, why not have a product where people can sell their wholly owned, or their wholly owned employee housing, and go into the pool for a rental in a facility that accommodates the changing needs of the population.
We don't have anything that would stop that.
I don't think so. We just don't have that facility.
You don't have that, but that, when you rebuild workforce housing, which is what we call it, why not call it community housing? And it's for all age groups that meet some of the covenants of this town in terms of regulations.
But essentially what you're saying is, because of your age, you no longer have to be employed to get into that.
Right.
What you're now calling community housing rather than workforce housing. That is a fundamental change to the housing program in Snowmass, and you need to address that. I don't know if you should address that in a comprehensive plan. If you want to change that, that would be in changing your code. Now, you can put it in here, but you're up here at the 100,000 foot level,
Right.
changing it. And at that point, we're not talking about types of floor plans and that kind of stuff. You're talking about
It's a
changing it
policy
from,
change, it's a
from
strategic
workforce
policy change.
housing to community housing.
And I think, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that flexibility is in here. And we had that discussion about workforce versus community versus aging. And that's where we kind of landed on that variety of housing types, knowing that we're trying to house a variety of people with different needs. And we didn't get into a lot of specifics because, well, all the politics and disagreeing opinions on the whole thing. And we thought, all right, this is the goal. More is kind of the answer. There's no doubt this is more affordable housing, no matter what you want to call it, is likely an answer. And then we would approach that way. And again, I'm just saying, that's how we got here. You guys, this is your document. This is one that you all need to buy off on. And if we need to make adjustments, by all means, that's why we're having this discussion. But I just wanted to let you know how we got there.
Marky,
Uh-huh.
can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Julianne, in your memo on employee housing, you talk about this 70% of full-time year-round, 60% of total to be brought forward. Now, that's not what is in here at the moment. In here and at the moment, it says, maintain the 60% housing mitigation standard for new construction in the village. So,
Totally different issue.
totally, well, okay. I am not in agreement with this 70% full-time year-round, okay? I would say, for myself, that 60% full-time year-round as a mitigation level, because mitigation, honestly, mitigation isn't going to be very meaningful because there's so many credits out there that the development of the Snowmass Center, which is, we've already been talking about, right? And the rest of the Base Village, there are very few affordable housing units that can come out of either of those projects.
Agreed.
Okay. So then we look at what the third CPA is, right? The third CPA being the entryway. It's possible that we'll have some commercial development in there, and that it would be possible that there would be housing requirement coming out of that. But two thoughts about it. Number one is, I don't see construction in the next 3 years in the entryway, because we got so much, we're up to our eyeballs in construction and major PUD, reviews. So I don't see any additional construction, and this document is supposed to be reviewed and updated on roughly every 3 years. So my thought is that we shouldn't have a number, okay, 60%, 70%, that we shouldn't have a number until we get the results of the updated workforce study, and then we have a number, we put it in here, and because I just don't think we're going to have a need over the next 3 years to actually have a mitigation number in here. Now, we the town, may decide, once we get the workforce study back, the town may decide to create another workforce housing project, okay? But we're not going to be subject to that, to a number, a percentage of mitigation or a percentage of anything. We're just going to do what we can do. So I don't see.
I think there's more possibility of some development happening up in West Village. And the condominiums up and down Carriage Way, not dissimilar to what we've been seeing in the Enclave, where they may end up wanting to add a few more units. So that's where we see. But I agree with you. I think there's going to be a real minimal amount of mitigation housing created over the course of the next probably 5 years anyways.
And I agree with the mitigation, but that's not what you're saying.
Yeah.
This
is totally different.
What the council got to, I thought, last time, 2 weeks ago, was bringing forward, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there was an agreement that the council said, let's bring forward the goal that was adopted in 2010, and that's the language that Julianne put in the statute.
Yeah, but that was a mitigation goal.
No.
No.
No, it was not mitigation.
Well, I thought we went through that last time, but I'll look it up.
Yeah, I thought it was mitigation.
You've got the document right in front of you, so and it talked about, and you'll have it quicker than I can say it, but it talked about
Maybe
60% of year-round employees and 70% of It was a 60 and it was a combination of 60 and 70%.
Yeah,
And the discussion we had 2 weeks ago was, let's settle on that 60% goal of employees. And that's the terminology we were hoping to bring forward as part of this plan. And then how quickly we meet it, there's the language in here that the planning commission went through last time. I'll find it, and the council actually agreed to, was, that workforce housing and that commitment to workforce housing needs to be balanced in the character of the town and the resources of the town, and that's under those
That's an
strategic
executive.
initiatives.
yeah, that's good language.
Yeah, and that, you all agreed to that, and then the bonus or the extra on top of that we got to last time, I thought, was, well, and why that's how we do it, the what of what we're trying to do is that 60%.
Trying to see where it is.
It's that first sentence in that
Yeah,
paragraph.
okay. Yeah, here, I see it,
In the draft?
no,
Not
this is
the draft,
in,
it's
this
in
is
the
in the
adopted plan
2010.
today.
2010.
2010.
This is in the 2010
comp
comp plan, and that is the language. But
Mhm.
I don't know, I guess I've moved away from thinking that if we're gonna have an updated study, then we should we should leave it open so that,
And there's nothing in the goals as proposed that was
Yeah.
gonna prohibit that, and I think as we go forward, we're gonna say, yeah, let's know these numbers. I don't think there's anything, I think that 60% number or 70, whatever number you settle on, it's that leadership kind of number that says, no, this is an important topic for us, we've heard it loud and clear, here's what we're aiming for, and then as more analysis comes in, modify from there, but at this point, it's your chance to say, we've heard it, we wanna aim for it. I guess I'm taking almost a 180 from you. You're saying, let's get the data, then set it.
yeah, I'm
Right,
saying,
that's
let's
at-
get,
set the number.
And I'm
I'd
saying
like
you've
to get
heard
the
it,
data
we know we
first.
can do it, and there's no way we're gonna build, I mean,
You don't have enough land.
well, the number, the last number, and numbers are dangerous, so take it for what it's worth. The last number was 380 something.
Right.
I mean, if we cut that in half and subtracted some, for 150 units, I mean, way less than that. We're gonna be studying this a lot. There's a lot of effort to get there. It's not gonna be a plop it down and done project. It's gonna be incrementally attacked. And I think that this information is going to come up. But in the meantime, this is the chance to provide that political leadership to say, no, this is something we wanna have happen. And I'm assuming that goal still stands. That's in your adopted goals when you guys met as a council in 16, whenever that last goal set was made, that was one of your goals that you guys set as a council, you adopted. So I'm assuming that still stands, and if so, this is just a great way to carry that forward.
So let's talk about that 60% and the number of units. And if it were 383, whatever the magic number is, at, let's say maybe 600 square feet, you're talking a lot of land.
Unless you go up.
Let's go up.
Well, now, here's the issue. That's where I'm gonna go with this, is that every time we turn around, people ask for variances on all their buildings. And within our land use code, we have a height limitation. Is it our goal to eliminate the height for our residential and commercial buildings? So you can build whatever you want to, no matter how tall you make it?
No, I think this plan says almost the opposite of that. I mean, it talks
Well,
about preserving.
the juxtaposition between 60%, a number, 383 at a minimum, at 600 feet, when you're pretty well built out, and your answer is go up, why even, I'm not sure that there's a rational nexus between that logic. Just go up.
Well, and they go up specifically for the draw site. And behind here, could it be designed in such a way that it's, I mean, maybe we shouldn't have said go up, maybe we should have said tucked in. I mean, pick an adjective, it all means the same. But I think those.
No, it doesn't. Tucked
Well,
in and go up
I guess
doesn't.
I'm not trying to sell anybody on anything right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the draw site would be the opportunity to have some density, and you had if our height is 38 feet?
38 feet.
and so what's that, 3 stories thereabouts? You know, is that an opportunity to have 2, 3-story buildings behind this building? Because that's about the height of this building, and can you tuck it in such a way that it meets? And I think when that project is to come forward, we would look right here and say it needs to fit the character and resources of the town.
And the land use code.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah,
this
that
just says
goes
the town. I
without
mean, this is
saying.
even more constrictive, I think. But I mean, that is the language that this council has said is important, and that's the direction we would take, is it's not at all costs, it's not at all heights, it's not in anything else. Whatever projects come forward need to fit the character and resources, and that's what we'd aim for. And then you guys get to be the ultimate,
I think you ought to put in the word land use code. Future councils won't understand the height limitation of 38 feet.
But whatever comes before us is gonna have to get reviewed, or future councils. I mean, all we're doing is stating a goal and kind of having that visionary document. I mean, this is, regardless of the numbers, we're just saying, let's try and hit this goal. And we're not trying to outline every single resource in here. We're just trying to set kind of some policy to say, yeah, we need employee housing. We need that. We know we've got some limitations, but let's not, you know, have that restrict our creativity. We don't know what's gonna happen in the future. There could be some, you know, development with housing that's unforeseen right now.
I'm not gonna argue with that. The point is that every darn time we see a new development project come in, we always give a variance. There's always variance.
Well, there's
Go up.
always an ask for a
But
height variance.
Guess what? They always get it. Or most, 90% of the time they get it.
Well, it's usually not as high as they want to go, but it is more than
Well,
38
in
feet.
Certain situations, we've gotten extra cash out of it, like East Village.
Yeah, well, you just turned around and spin it.
I have a quick question, if you guys, on the strategic initiatives. For instance, on page 49 and page 30, both talk about waste management. Shouldn't those be consolidated together, Julianne?
There's a reason why they're separate.
Okay, I know one,
And what we,
one's talking
because it
about the
came up
landfill.
with planning commission as well.
Okay.
And one was really to, this is in on the page 30, this is in the environmental section. And so we thought it was important to have language about what we're trying to do with the waste management under the environmental section. And then you'll see it again in the section 7.
Right.
And that has to do with being transparent and working together with other entities and provide reliable services and municipal transparency. So that's why that was more or less duplicated again here, not quite exactly, but the idea was that we, you know, again, try and emphasize that in partnership, because we've got this, the county's facility is limited, et cetera, we should be looking at ways to really try and limit our, our trash behavior.
So, what you just said, I still don't understand why they're not together. I mean, for instance, they could be 1.5, which is the first one I'm referring to.
Zero
And
waste.
7.9 could be 1.6. I mean, what would be,
Just the format we thought was gonna please the planning commission through their feedback the last time. I mean, that's really.
I mean, they're both covered very well, but I just didn't understand why they're separated by pages.
It was a formatting issue with the last discussion, and we were trying to kind of get 7 opinions there wrapped in, and that's how we kind of thought it was close.
Okay, and another question I have, on page 14, talks about, we talked about our CPAs, and with our public comment letters that are in there possibly for the new Snowmass Club, on page 14, underneath privately owned recreation and open space areas, it specifically says these areas are suitable only for supplementary minor development that enhances these amenities and should not be considered development land. Now, the potential for the public comment section on the comp plan kind of contradicts this, doesn't it?
I don't think that it necessarily contradicts it. Here is, this was part of the reason why we were talking about those future CPAs, because we're aware that the club wants to do some things. And obviously, this letter is saying, you know, we're gonna wanna do some things here.
They want to be included in CPAs.
No
They-
way.
Is that correct? Isn't that what the letter says?
It doesn't say specifically CPA.
Yeah, it does.
Yes, yes, it
Certainly does.
Sure does.
The last couple of sentences.
Allow for.
Oh, the future redevelopment, yeah.
But this is the difficult part that we went through with this whole planning process. There's some people that wanted to provide for some flexibility, and there's some folks that really wanted to make sure this plan was constricting growth. And time again, we heard, you make sure it's directing it as closely as possible. And so that's how it got written this way, with a lot of feedback. And I think the feedback from the Snowmass Club is, you might have missed us. And when we talked about this through the Planning Commission last time, and Julianne touched on it in her opening comments, growth is not directed to the Snowmass Club as a CPA like the other three areas. But it does not preclude growth from happening there. And I think the idea that we talked about last time was, if they wanted to do something significant there, is there a possibility for that to happen? And that idea that was talked about pre-sketch was kind of the notion we worked through, so that it's not identified here, but it's not precluded, but knowing that because it's not identified, it's not where we're trying to direct it, it's gonna take a little bit more effort like.
Right, and we discussed this also at the think tank, and the think tank landed on, we haven't seen anything on the Snowmass Club. This whole plan was around 3 CPAs, and consideration could be given, and the language here was fine with the think tank.
It's kind of a predictable, flexible
Right,
argument. And
right.
they're both good values to have, some predictability and some flexibility.
Right.
And I think the feedback we've gotten from the Planning Commission and even the think tank was maybe a little bit more flexibility would be all right. And I think John was the one who pointed out, it's not precluded. Just because it's not in a CPA does not mean some kind of development there is precluded. It just is gonna take a little extra. I don't even know you said extra.
Yeah.
Those are my words.
Well, it's an existing PUD.
A couple other notes, but they'll come up later.
What was it, John?
It's an existing PUD. And
You could come in and amend it.
they can come in and amend it. It doesn't have to be,
Part of the CPA.
And what we talked through with the Planning Commission, and I think the think tank, I know for the Planning Commission for sure, is that if any PUD comes in, Snowmass Club or any place,
well, it doesn't even have to be a PUD. I
It
mean, it could
does.
be zoned something and they come in and say, we have reasons to change this to a PUD.
but you would look at the aspiration statement, you say, here's kind of our goals, you would look at those guiding principles, here's the things that we want to make judgments under, and you would talk about, the just big enough concept. You say, okay, here's the 3 legs of the stool that we're evaluating with. Does this fit or not? And that's what you guys are elected to help make that decision. Or not help, but to make that decision.
And we also heard at your last meeting that you did want to have as much flexibility as possible. That was
I think it's
one of our
wise.
discussions. So not totally pinpoint. So I think this language could still work with a Snowmass Club proposal coming in. Because it's an amenity to their it's like an improvement or whatever. I think that it could still fall in here, but I think it would be appropriate for you to have that extra meeting ahead of time, to make sure that that's something that you're gonna be comfortable with or not, before they start spending a whole lot of time and energy trying to get through any process.
To be clear, you're talking about a code change. This is talking about a vision, and that's the kind of stuff that we gotta figure out. What is that? Once you say, hey, we wanna allow this level of flexibility, this level of predictability, then we'll come back and say, the new code would say, if it's not here, it may be A, B, or C. But that code, we were mixing a little bit of apples and apples.
Well, what you're talking about is making our PUD a 4-step instead of a 3-step.
If it's not in the CPA.
I get it. A mandatory pre-sketch.
Yeah. If it's not in a CPA. And that's what you guys would talk through and say, is that worthy or not?
Well, while we're talking about code versus comp plan, I'm on page 32, and under next steps of amending the land use in the code to provide incentives for redevelopment and rehab. I thought we had something in the code that provides an incentive for rehabilitation and redevelopment. Am I mistaken, John?
No, there's a redevelopment housing credit
Right,
Code.
in the code.
right? So this is something else?
We just thought that we need to take another look at that, because we aren't sure that the, quote, incentive is enough.
That's almost an ancient incentive at this point. And there was a time shortly after the base village approval that there was a West Village overlay master plan, which was considered to be an incentive to redevelop that area. It did not get adopted. It was considered, and I don't know if that's what this particular sentence is referring to. At the time, the ownership up there felt that that was very necessary to include. So it was drawn and designed and conceived, but it did not make it into the code of, I'm not sure you have it, but I think.
So is this a function, will this then be a function for the planning commission?
I would see this as a function of a land use code amendment.
Yeah, but
Yes.
designed or worked through the planning commission?
Oh, absolutely. It's a requirement. Yeah, and you know, John's right. I'm pretty sure he's right about that West Village thing, but it was also where some of this discussion came about was some of these older condo complexes that we have, that we really want to encourage them to upgrade. And, you know, maybe we need to kind of look at ways to be able to make it more incentived.
Well, most of them
do
that have, you know, updated themselves exterior-wise, architecturally and so forth, you know, have done it by finding ways to create additional units that they could then sell to finance,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So
No,
is that the kind of,
somewhere. No, it's in this.
is that the kind of,
Economic development.
Right.
is that the kind of incentive you're talking about?
That would be one. You know, but this was really intended to take a look at that one, the one section in the code, and I can't pull it up right now, but it was to give them a 1.15% credit for housing mitigation or something
In a
like that.
redevelopment scenario.
In a redevelopment,
Yeah.
so, you know, in this day and age, maybe it needs to be bumped up a little more, you know, just because it's so expensive
But
to,
then, you know, then you're tipping the balance on your housing goal.
Right.
yeah.
I mean, you know, if in fact we're gonna look for other incentives, I would kind of think we wanna stay away from housing credits because they do influence the other goal. And find something else that we can offer and not offer a housing credit.
Well, this is very broad.
Yes, it is. No, I
So
understand
I
that.
think that we could do that, you
Yep.
know, in the bigger
Right.
discussion.
Yep.
It's pretty
Um,
broad.
So I want to just move on to page 33. There's a statement about develop a master plan along Upper Brush Creek Road. So where is Upper Brush Creek Road? Where does it start?
I guess you'd have to say the transit center. Isn't that the highest point on Upper Rush Creek Road?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, this is the desire. This is the desire to connect Mountain View to the Snowmass Center.
Okay.
All housing up in that area.
Yeah,
But don't you also want to connect that housing to the mall?
Yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
that's why it's brush, I mean,
That's why I said, it starts at the transit center on the mall,
down to the center.
down to the center. He asked what the top was. That's why I said there.
Okay. I mean, that's what I
Doesn't say
just
that,
wanted to
though.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
That's all.
And and I think a theme you see when you go through this is any kind of those pedestrian amenities, those kind of anything like that, are all uphill of lower Kearns. That's where that density or idea starts, going uphill from there. It's where the village core is, all that kind of stuff. And so the way I read this is anything downhill from that is not necessary.
Okay.
You should read the second one then. It says,
I mean,
All Creek and Highline.
I again request that references to the CCP be removed. There's a lot of them, including to revisit the CCP. And I don't think the CCP is necessary anymore, and here's why. If you just put in, develop a comprehensive bicycle promotion strategy to encourage increased bicycle-related tourism, there's nothing to be gained by including the statement about consistent with the CCP. Because we've already gone 2 years since the CCP did not pass. Things have changed, the industry is different, the opportunities are different. The draft CCP may not even be applicable anymore. So take it out, and on page 44, we talk about a capital improvement plan, for a 5-year capital improvement plan. I think that anything that we wanted to do infrastructure-wise that might have been in the CCP,
Be here.
we could do through the
Good
capital
citizens
improvement
plan.
plan.
For sure. But the capital improvement plan's a budgeting kind of
I understand that.
And I mean, in the CCP, the idea was or is that, do we want that connectivity? I mean, and that's,
But you don't, but Clint, you don't need to cite a plan that was never approved.
and it says in here, that's why it says revisit it and see.
I understand, but
Don't revisit it, it's all in here.
don't, there's nothing to revisit. All the things, all the pieces of it are in here. There is information about sidewalks, there's information about bike paths, there's information about e-bikes and
Connectivity.
and connectivity vis-a-vis traffic rates. So all the things that are in, or were, in the CCP are in here.
Except for the prioritized projects are not. And that's, I mean, I don't know that I'm just saying, when I read this, we tried to take all that reference out. We made sure it always said not adopted. We always said draft. We always said conceptual, and that's what's in here. And so that everybody knows that there's a document there, and it's got a number of prioritized projects that says, this is where emphasis and focus should land, and that is not in here anywhere.
Well, could we not put that in as an appendix of the prioritized projects?
And just put the projects in.
It-
Or
it's an
or aren't
appendix.
these next steps really the projects?
Some, I mean,
Some of them are projects,
And
not
that's-
all of them.
and that's why I think, if this just says revisit, because if you revisit and say, it's wrong, then great, we've revisited. I mean, we're not trying to defend it or anything, it's just, when the CCP came through, it was, we need to have the comp plan first, and then we'll look at the CCP again. At least that's how I remember the direction. And then that's all it says is, okay, the comp plan's gonna be adopted in the next month or two, go back and
Well,
look
I mean,
at it.
I'm one person, but there are people in the think tank who are concerned about urbanization, as am I. And my opinion of the CCP was, it really was directed towards urbanizing this town.
And if you read it again, and that's your read again, and everybody agrees, then we would change it. I think that's the feedback we need. It's like, we were at the planning commission meeting last week, and Gus was talking specifically about the word sidewalk in here, and how he found it offensive, because it was urbanization and that kind of thing. And so the direction from the planning commission, if I remember correctly, was call it a path, call it
Walking path.
a walking path, and that at least gives direction for design that it ought not be suburban, and those kinds of things. And I guess I'm just saying, there's a lot of interpretation that still needs to happen and a lot of direction that still needs to happen. And by reviewing it, you've got that opportunity, and that's what this plan's trying to say, is that direction still needs to occur. That's how I took it.
Well,
And
I mean, I don't know how my fellow council members feel, but I'd be much happier without referencing the CCP, and we can bring projects in, you know, in the appendix if that makes people feel more satisfied or give them ideas of what there was to do. But that's my opinion, and that's where I land.
I don't know if you really need the CCP.
I don't see it.
I don't,
I think the main difference with the CCP is that there's a lot of detail in that. It's a more refined master plan specifically on the topic of connecting, you know, getting people from A to B, especially as it relates to commuting and getting around town, et cetera. So although we have very general statements in here and we talk about, you know, connectivity being important and making sure we can get to, you know, from A to B, et cetera, I think you're going to find more detail if you were going to revisit the CCP. So I agree with Clint that I think that there's really no harm in keeping it in here. And if you want to bring the list, so to speak, in the appendices like we did with the poster and we did with the transportation, we can do that. But
we purposely didn't, because it's not adopted like the poster
Right.
is.
well, like this one sounds like it's adopted, implement pedestrian facility recommendations from the CCP.
Yeah.
But our direction was for this plan to use the CCP as a guiding document for the development of
Which
the
is
comp
in
plan.
here, which is in here. I think most everything from the CCP is in here. And I haven't done the
Not-
crosswalk.
Not to that level. of
Well, I
detail.
think what we were talking about last time was not having the specifics in here. And I think what the CCP does is provide those specifics so that we can keep this more general to the vision.
Well, connect Base Village to Snowmass Center is pretty darn, a more direct pedestrian connection. That's pretty specific.
Well, it doesn't say how we're gonna do
It
it.
says and/or aerial connection. Bridges or aerial connection, right here.
So, right, I mean, there's a lot of variation to how we can get to that goal, but I think
That's
The
exactly
premise-
from, that's from the
But the premise
CCP.
is we want people to be connected. We want them to be walking and biking.
And I think we have that throughout this document. It's emphasized a lot. So I don't disagree with you that we've taken a lot of the information that came out of the CCP and incorporated in here. It's just that there's some other parts of it that we don't have in here that may or may not, you know, want to be revisited. For instance, the intersection, you know, types that were proposed at one point, that kind of information, you might want to revisit that in the CCP.
And I'm reading the bullet. Implement pedestrian facility recommendations from the CCP. It says once adopted. I mean, that should say if adopted. I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, if that's helping, that's definitely, that should say if adopted, because it's
What page is that?
34.
That's on page 34.
And I don't know if that's the example you're using, Madam Mayor, when you said that, but
I just
Those-
don't think you need all the CCP, all the references to CCP in here. I mean, it's a frequent statement throughout this
Throughout the whole
section,
thing.
which, if it were me, I'd prefer to see an appendix that would have the CCP.
and this is where we get stuck a little bit, because I hear two of you loud and clear, I hear one of you, I haven't heard a lot from Tom, and I haven't heard a lot from Alyssa, and we're trying to make this
I'll tell you
document
that
really kind of lined up.
all the references to the CCP doesn't bother me, because it does say, and I forget where, I have it highlighted, for the future adoption of the CCP. So it's just, it doesn't bother me that much, because it's spelled out that it hasn't been adopted yet.
My point is, though, when you reference a document, and let's just say the housing study that we did way back in 2008, it's not, it was never part of the, it was never included as an appendix
Right.
of the 2010 comp plan. If you could
I
have an
see it both,
appendix.
I see it both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, take it out, I mean, because by the time I think Bob mentioned, by the time we finish with this, it's almost time to start a new one. Okay?
Well, yeah, and that's gonna
And
be,
that will be something that we're
hopefully
going
we can,
to
so hopefully
hopefully
we can take a little bit of
change.
a break. Hopefully we can convince you of a break.
Julianne, there is a duplicate bullet point on that section on 3.1. The last bullet on page 33 and the last bullet on this section on page 34 is a duplicate.
Right, correct.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, just as a point.
Yeah, and again, some of this was, I apologize, I should have caught that. We were trying to combine a number of sections previously into kind of one that had to do with the walking, biking, safety, et cetera. So it might have been in two places, so that's why I ended up there, but we'll make sure there's only one.
One other question on 3.2. I wasn't at our last meeting when this was discussed, but it talks about the further master plan, the Benedict Trail from Base Village to Upper Village, to reclaim this historic pedestrian connection. I love that as a goal or the thought process, but some of that land is privately held.
All of it is.
All of it is.
So, was this eminent domain,
No, not necessarily.
buyback?
I mean, that's a tool that you could use, but the idea is, you know, the bottom portion is still fairly intact. You know, people can
Yeah, it
walk up
is.
and down it. But that upper portion really kind of got taken over and
Right.
dismissed
Right.
as part of the, and that was part of the original master plan. And so there was, I know that at least one of the Planapalooza meetings that I sat in on, there was a lot of interest that people thought, you know what, we really should look and see if there's a different way that we can get down through from the top of the village, rather than just on the curb, you know, on the
Right,
attached
like the
sidewalk,
old Benedict
but something
Trail.
that's a little bit more pleasant, et cetera. So that's where that came in from.
That'd be a beautiful pathway for an alpine garden, walking path.
Art walk,
Yeah.
it's a great space.
Yeah. Just saying.
I agree with you.
Everybody agrees with you, except the people that have the liability for people crossing their property. And
Yeah.
that's where the disconnect happened.
But that's where the master plan could identify some tools that
Not
maybe.
saying otherwise, I'm just saying that once it wasn't owned in common by the SRA, it became, the owners became protective of the property.
Now, there's something that,
Somebody else want to take a minute? You looking? I'll go.
well, I
You
just,
want to go?
No, go ahead.
Go.
go ahead and
Go,
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 because I'm
Tom.
looking
Go,
for
Tom.
something.
I gotta get my breath.
Okay. Appendix A2 is pretty big, and I think some of that stuff should be pulled out and put in other sections. I mean, for instance, some of the housing issues are in A2 as well as in other places. Is that too much redundancy in there?
Well, the thought process was, you know, a lot of this was in the plan itself. And the way we've been describing this is, the plan stops at page 55, essentially. The
Right.
meat of the plan is at 50, is that
Yeah.
right?
That's about right.
Is at 55.
Yeah.
And so everything after that is extra. If you don't get there, you're not missing any critical components. And so the appendix grew because we took so much out of the meat of the plan and put it back there. And it's there for folks that want to reference it, but it's not critical. And that's how it got to where it is.
There's also on page 25, on the strategic initiatives on air quality, number 9, I've gotten so many different people tapping me on the shoulder talking about the air quality with these blowers. I don't know if that's
Page
good.
25?
Page 25. Let me find it, I have it on my.
27.
27, excuse me, I'm sorry. Page And it is page 27. It's that initiative about number 9, air quality, talking about the minimizing the airborne dust and other pollutants. We don't mention the air blowers that seems like every landscaper uses, right? The guys down here at the center use, and that's exactly where I get tapped on the shoulder saying, we need something done about this, because they're just blowing it from one section to the other, and then the wind comes and blows it back, and anyway, I don't know if that's something that needs to be addressed. I have a note on it just because several people asked me to talk about it.
I mean, the way to enforce that change would be a law, and this is,
Correct.
this says, hey, you need to minimize it. As a council person, if you said, you know what, I really agree with that, let's minimize it, then we'd
That's
pass a law.
basically what I've done, and I basically said it's private property. It's not necessarily us to,
No, you could absolutely regulate airborne dust that's caused by blowers, and because unless they're blowing it to a collection point on their own property, and if they're dispersing it into the air and it's carried elsewhere, that's like putting your snow on somebody else's property.
that's basically what they're doing.
Right.
And I'm just
But the way to
using
do
the
that-
center.
This states that goal. The
Right.
way to achieve that goal is through regulation by law, code.
Yeah, I think there's some towns that regulate leaf blowers. You just can't use them.
Ooh, that'd be
Well,
bad.
and I think Tom's talking about a different situation. Leaf blowers are usually doing that to a collection
Right.
point and then disposing of it. What he's
I think-
talking about is
But Bill's
sidewalks.
referring to the machine that does it. you know,
Right, right.
And they're using it like a broom instead of a,
Broom.
And that's the old-fashioned way.
Well, and a lot of places allow water, pressure washers, and then it goes into the drain system, but it's not an airborne emission.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, yeah.
Found what I was looking for, so I'm fine.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions on the summary tables.
Oh.
Page 51. I'm down, the third one from the bottom, requiring developers to provide necessary pedestrian improvements to mitigate impacts of the development, et cetera, et cetera. We went through a pretty contentious discussion about that a while back. And I think that is a, that's appropriate depending on where the development is. I don't think it's appropriate in every case.
agreed.
And I don't think, so I would like to modify the wording in some respect so that it becomes more clear that this is limited to the core, or if that's where it is. If it's in the core, then that's what, it should be identified that way. If there is some other language that explains where it is or isn't, I think it should be in there. Or I would like to see it in there.
Well, the policy is related to prioritize walking, biking, and safety improvements. And we're suggesting that we have the need for that throughout the whole town, not just in the village core. So yes, we had a lot of discussion about a sidewalk on a project recently. But again, because they were going through a process, council could have decided one way or the other whether they wanted that to happen or not, because that was a PUD. And so this is really just saying that if somebody is going to do something and we want to make sure that we've got a connection in terms of, a walking path or whatever you want to call it.
Well, all it says is pedestrian access. That's really what it says.
If that first on the top line, it says require the developer to provide the necessary pedestrian improvements. If that said appropriate, then you would evaluate what's appropriate at that point. Would that help you
That might
achieve?
help.
Yeah, so it could be just a walk.
Then, I mean, what this is just trying to say is you guys get to evaluate that
Right.
level of,
Right.
Okay.
You get to scrutinize
yeah,
it.
I mean, it gets said to be,
Okay. There, the step underneath there, monitoring vehicle occupancy trends, that's actually in two different places. Is it intended to be, Julianne? It's under the prioritize walking, biking, and safety improvements, and it's also under managed parking and transit under 3.6 on page 52.
It does not need to be in both places.
I think the logic was, it's that person trip idea, which is kind of a change from our existing code, which really relies on levels of service for vehicles. And this is trying to say there's more to evaluate than levels of service. It's transit use, it's all those other types of things. And I agree, I don't know if it needs to be in both, but because it hit transportation issues, because it hit parking issues, yeah, it's a format. And I mean, that's the stuff that you guys can certainly let us know what reads best. But that's how it got between the two.
Okay, I mean, I just saw it.
It's very similar to what Tom brought up with the trash.
I just saw it duplicated, so then on 3.7, the next step of considering amending the land use and development code to provide a comprehensive traffic impact analysis, I mean, that's part of it now. We require
We already do.
an impact analysis. Why is that in there? It's 3.7, and it's the second.
It's that next, it's the transit usage, the shared vehicle usage, the trail connections. I think that's that, again, that person trip generation impact that it's trying to get to. Maybe there's a dangling participle in there. It's a comprehensive traffic impact analysis that addresses traffic generation and alternatives. And it's that alternatives that's the new idea. Because right now we measure level of service.
Right.
Oh, and that's all it does?
That's all it
Right.
does.
And now we're saying there's other things that we ought to be measuring.
Okay.
I want to pop back up under 3.5, talking of parking price increases at various locations. The only place that there's parking prices would be Ski-Co's parking lot or Base Village parking garage. Is
Well,
that right?
numbered lots.
Or numbered lots.
Number of lots in the winter.
Yeah, you pay for a parking sticker.
Well, as a resident.
Hmm?
As a resident, you do, but there's other folks that pay
Users.
different daily rates and whatnot. And there's also the idea of summer parking. If we continue to have successful events in the summer, is that something we need to be investigating, some kind of,
I just hope we don't become Aspen with their congestion pricing. That's really a deterrent for guests.
and that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we make sure folks have the most convenient parking, but don't abuse it with storage and that kind of thing?
Okay, I can buy that argument, but
And I don't.
And the whole idea is to not have that much, so people use the
well,
public
that's the idea,
transportation.
but the point is, you're gonna have parking. You can use public transportation, but I'll tell you, up at my place, there is no buses.
And I have one more in here, and this kind of comes back to the discussion we had a little earlier about square footage for different housing options. And I want to throw out whether we want to allow for the flexibility of something like a tiny home concept.
And so I think 5.4, Julie and I have talked about this, and I'm happy you brought it up. I
Yeah.
think there's a typo there. I think it should say, allow free market micro housing. And so that if someone wanted to come up with that free market idea of mini homes or small homes or tiny homes, or then they can sell it, and it kind of creates that hotbed concept, great. But I think if that's in my opinion, that I think that was a typo. I think that concept was allow some flexibility but the way they kind of worded some things, and then I thought it didn't read.
But under that same category is all the workforce housing, that's what it's.
Yeah, but I think with
it's-
tiny,
It's
Well,
tied in with the workforce housing, 5.4.
Well, and I think that's back to the mayor's point before, is like, this whole housing section, and this is part of the clarity we think we need to make, it's variety of housing. And a 300 square foot free market unit could be that variety if somebody wants it. They want to show up, be warm, take a shower, and get out. It could be great for that kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, as I understand tiny homes, these, micro home concepts, they are affordable they would be affordable for people in the workforce, for anybody, whether they're in the workforce or not, but they're certainly more affordable if they can be, you can find a piece of property and where you could put a number of them and then, and then sell or lease off the spaces, but the units themselves are affordable
Because they're smaller.
because they're small
I mean, you take your $500 a
and they're
foot for-
usually prefabricated. So, do you think that the wording there needs to be modified a little, Clint, or?
And this is, again, just my opinion, reading
Yeah.
through this, and we've talked about it, and we needed to bring it up with y'all, but I think if it allows free market, micro housing, and then that first box, revise the minimum units, I think that's right, but the one below, revise workforce housing requirements to allow smaller units, that's the one I don't think fits. That's the one I think that's wrong. Because to Tom's point, that's different than what the point's trying to be made. If we're trying to create more free market opportunities.
Yeah. So basically, it's to allow free market opportunity or
Opportunity
purchase.
to get in that free market.
So here's a question, and there's another development down in the lower Roaring Fork that is a micro. It's on the table at the
Yes.
planning commission.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you differentiate between the micro housing, tiny homes, and trailer parks?
Personally, I think here it has to look way different.
Well, we may say that, but there are people, this is a micro housing project, but many people in the community and that county says they do not have a consideration within their land use code in terms of the difference between micro housing and mobile home park.
It's true.
Well, just off the top of my head, and because I'm aware of a micro-housing project where the homes are on wheels, they're portable, and another micro-housing project where the homes are on foundations,
Uh-huh.
okay? So there is a difference if you want to, if one would want to make the line as to the portability of the unit, you could. I mean, you could make that as an argument, and
Well, my point is, we haven't differentiated product type.
no, we haven't.
Well,
And-
you wouldn't do that in your plan.
You wouldn't
No,
do
we
that
Do
here.
that by
Well, you
code.
don't, we need to take note of that for land use code.
And, where those work in other communities is when they got a lot of flat space and they can spread out a little
Yeah,
bit.
right.
We don't,
You don't, I was gonna say,
it's not, it's a market-driven issue for us. It's gonna control a lot of that, I think.
And to be clear on this, I think actually the conversation Clint and I had was, our intention wasn't for this to substitute for mitigation housing. This was more intended for, the ability for somebody to come in, free market, do something smaller that could be sold. Or if the town decided that they wanted, that they saw the desire to offer smaller units, but not intended to be for purposes of mitigation, because then a developer is gonna go, oh, well, here's your,
Here's
You
your
know,
standard.
here's your standard housing units.
did this come up in Planapalooza at all, or is this just a new notion coming out of TPUC?
No, this,
I don't-
you know what, this is in all of the planning, magazines right now. It's very
Well, maybe in a magazine, but did it come up
Popular.
as something?
You know, I'm trying to
Don't know
think,
where
I
it
know
came
that
up.
there was a discussion about it at some of the roundtables that we had. And I think that it was more a discussion about making places to live, providing more places to live for people, even if it's, small housing, because some people might prefer a 300 square foot over having to take in a roommate in an 800 square foot, kind of situation. So it went more to the variety of housing types.
Did you, when we did the housing types and the housing, it was an option that was put up there.
I'm just not supportive of it in the town, but,
Well, I don't know that it's
Micro-housing?
gonna,
yeah.
I don't know the
I don't know where you-
likelihood it's gonna happen, but
I mean, just going down to 400 square feet for a studio was a little bit of community angst way back when. But anyway,
Well, we have 461 in one place, and then we have 350 under micro-housing, and then 300 under next steps for minimum unit size.
you probably ought to have some consistency.
The 461 that's our mitigation rate? Where are you reading that?
Where's that?
Page on.
And we can get it after the meeting, but I think one's a mitigation and one's it's like, hey, maybe you ought to consider allowing it. And I think what Julianne's point is we don't want to change that mitigation because the code's set up by number of units and it would
size, square foot.
decrease the requirements, which I don't think anyone's trying to get done. But we can
Well,
find out.
allowing micro-housing almost sounds like something a developer would go to immediately.
And that's why if
with
it's free
this
market, then if they can sell it, would we be okay with that? If somebody bought an older hotel and did something creative with it and allowed for smaller units, would we be okay with that? Depends. Right?
Yeah, again, I just don't want this vision to be clogged up by a lot of, specifics. I think the code allows for that, and this should be more the guiding document.
So reference to square footage should be coming from land use code is what you're thinking more of.
Well, I mean, I'm not against, I think anything that gets brought before us is gonna have to go through approval, so, I just don't think any specifics in here, is gonna make a difference one way or the other.
So, Clint, earlier on, Julianne, you said that the planning commission felt or talked about removing the reflections section, which seems to go from, or at least it starts on page 64. And I'm not really sure where it ends. Can you help me with that?
147.
147, so it's that whole, it's the entire,
And I would there was one person that brought up the idea that the planning commission is going to talk
Yeah.
about at the next meeting. The planning commission did not settle on that.
No,
One member brought up the notion, the idea, and they said, let's talk about that
when we
this
get to
upcoming
it.
Wednesday.
We'll let them hassle with this.
Yeah, well, that's fine, it's okay, I'm just trying to understand what it is.
It's huge, that
It's,
section.
it's a lot of pages. A lot of pages. I'm not prepared to talk about it tonight. But what I did look at, though, was the Appendix B, the information on the just big enough concept. Sorry, John, sorry, Tom, I gotta bring it up again.
That's okay, I could bring it up with you.
And
171.
yeah, and what I was really wondering was on 175, on the bottom, under the suggestions, it says there should be agreement around the meaning of the items of the terms including, and there's a bunch of items down there. And there's a few more on the back page. And I wonder really if if it would have value to kind of go through and talk about some or all, whatever of those values we would like to talk about, because they're important. They're important to this comp plan. They're important to the future decision makers understanding, what they mean. Because I suspect they mean something different to everybody who's sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right, and I know this was written before that executive summary, and hopefully that executive summary might answer some of that. Because I don't know that it does, but that was that idea of, rather than trying to, well, that was the idea, is like if the executive summary could be written in such a way that in 3 pages, we could identify village character, small town feel, sustainability, and at least know how it's going to be implemented. That's what we tried to do there. But I think you're right. If that executive summary doesn't describe this the way that this council thinks that ought to be described, that this is the time to rectify that.
We probably need to do a crosswalk by next meeting
Yeah.
on this, each individual.
Yeah.
to see if it's
I mean,
specific.
I would go back
Yeah,
and
I'll
look
go
at the
back and take a look.
executive summary.
Yep.
I'll make myself a note to do that.
Yep, that's what I'm gonna do.
We kind of went through that a little bit with the planning commission last time, and talked about those three areas of evaluation and see if they really. I think there was some concern brought up by at least one planning commission member brought up, is this really aiming towards enough conservation? And after reviewing it, I want to say that there's agreement that it was, but I think that's for you guys to evaluate as well.
And Bob, I'll just share with you what I shared with the planning commission. I went back and forth in the editing of this document with taking that whole section out. But when you start reading the plan from cover to cover, and we discussed just bigger enough, et cetera, there's no reference to it. And so that's why I ended up taking this white paper, if you will, and putting it back into an appendices so people would have an opportunity to read more about it.
I think it's a good thing to include, because it was an important decision and an important evaluation that this community made a number of years ago.
Right.
I think it belongs there, just,
Is it achieving it?
yeah.
Okay, let's
I'm
read
good.
that for
next
meeting.
time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other comments?
So the question was, is the executive summary strong enough in regard to conservation?
To all of these,
I think for all those principles or all those values that were called out.
on the bottom of
Is it-
175.
Right.
I mean, because most folks, this will shock you, might read 3 pages, and hopefully that gives them a good understanding of what the plan says. Some folks will read the next 40, and then very few is going to read past that. But
Oh, come now.
I'm sorry to shock you. I don't mean to be that person, but that's.
What a shocker.
Some people will never look at it,
And yeah, exactly.
like the applicants.
Okay, Julianne, you're taking copious notes. Do you have any?
I'm not taking copious notes because I'm hearing you guys bring some things up, but I'm not necessarily hearing, let's change this language to whatever,
well, we'll
and
see if
is
you
there
change it by the-
agreement on that? So, I don't really have a whole lot that, there's some that I've noted.
And what'll happen is on the 6th, with any luck, you will have a recommendation or a resolution from the Planning Commission, and you guys can use that to be your next basis of discussion, to figure out where you're at and where they're at, and hopefully that'll help guide your decision-making from that point forward.
Mhm.
Anything else, Tom?
Nope, I've got my notes.
Bob?
I hit my points, I think.
Bill?
I'm good.
We'll send you notes.
You're gonna get the Planning Commissions on the 6th, so you're not gonna get them from us, because you'll see that, and then assuming that happens, then we'll start preparing, an ordinance for you guys to review from there.
Right, so the process should be wait for the planning commission comments before we start sending any comments, right?
Yes. Technically, yes.
You can do what you like. I think on the next meeting, you're gonna see what they've got to say, and then we can understand where everything's lining up, and it'll help us understand where the council's coming from, and it'll help us develop the first and second reading of the ordinance adopting this plan.
So, but the 6th of August is actually a presentation from the chair of the planning commission, correct?
It's a public hearing.
Right.
One of the presentations you'll receive is from the planning commission. And so anybody
But
gets
it's
to
gonna
show.
be a summary from the chair, not necessarily a joint meeting.
He's gonna
It's gonna be-
deliver the recommendations
Correct.
to the council.
And we'll invite the rest of the commission, and we'll find out if there's a majority, and
Okay.
we'll figure that out. But
Okay.
but with any luck, in the next 2 meetings, they'll have a resolution for your review.
Okay. Good work.
I'm good,
Good
I'm good,
work.
I'm
Do you
good.
want to continue the public hearing to the
Mhm.
6th?
I'm looking at what is next to come. We've only had one public comment to date. That was on page 23. No other comments?
We have the 2 comments. One was
Oh, 2
from the
comments.
golf course, and the other was
Oh.
from Pat Kiefer.
Okay, okay,
Those are the only 2 that I've received.
okay, thank you.
Okay, make sure we get them the plan up.
We will continue the public hearing, this public hearing on the comprehensive plan to our next meeting, which is August the 6th at 4. Maybe 4:30. It'll be on that date. Town council starts at 4. Moving on, the next administrative report. This is Town Council strategic goal to increase community engagement. It's found on page 26 of your packet. Travis, are you going to present, or should we just move right into the suggestions?
You may.
Yelled at. I don't have a presentation. Hopefully it's just kind of a easy and fun discussion of ideas that we could do to help the town council meet their strategic goal of increasing community engagement. We included a few ideas that we thought might be a good start, but mostly just wanted to hear from you on what you thought would be a good idea for staff to prepare.
A question for you. This was a goal in 2016?
I thought it was April 2017. Was when the
I think we
latest
reaffirmed.
round was adopted.
Okay.
It could be 2016. Time flies.
The difficult part for some of the, I mean, they're good ideas, is we need to make sure that if it's something that you all can be there, and this is the idea for the council to be present, to listen and talk, and so it comes down to time and schedule. And if we can understand some of the things that are gonna help you, early mornings, late afternoons, then some of the scheduling could be easier potentially. And I mean, obviously outreach, different times of the day for different types of jobs, different types of people.
Exactly.
is
I don't know
beneficial.
if it's necessary to have a lot of giveaways, other than a free cup of coffee. Or whatever you want to do, free bowl of ice cream, or granola bar.
I'm kind of with you on that.
I think it's so hard to get the public to come out anyway, as you can tell by the throngs of people that are here tonight. Be better for us to go to where the people are. I mean, I think maybe Thursday night concerts, maybe we start at 5 o'clock and have people, just meet in a certain place and have people come and air their thoughts.
Well, that works for summertime.
Yeah.
That means you got to rent a room.
You can put up a table. You can put up a table in the mall, and with meet your representatives. I think P-Trab people did that one summer,
They did.
right? And they had people come by and talk to them, and I suspect we could have the same thing.
We ought to ask them what their experience was, because they did do it, and I don't remember. Travis, you staff P-Trab, do you remember?
I
recall.
don't believe I was here.
Might have
when
been
they-
before your time.
Yeah, when they did the booth. I do still have the banner that they used, however, so it's evidence. It did,
I
it did happen.
Can we put town council on the back?
Some duct tape over
What, I think that was more about people wanting to get to the here, they may get to the hill to put their stuff down so they get their spot, versus people stopping by and really having conversations, more hello, I think, if I remember right, but.
That may be. I can certainly ask. I think the idea here was that you would have, whether it's free ice cream or a treat or whatever, some sort of lure to get people in
I
to
think
start a
it's a great
conversation,
idea.
or at least put faces to names.
Could do that at the
You
rec
guys.
center also.
Right, and that's in.
Rec center would be a great place.
In the
if-
summer, it would be a very good place.
If the floors dry out soon enough, right?
I wish that were funny.
I mean, we have a lot of problem with those floors. I like I can't believe it's gonna cost $2,500 for an ice cream social, but.
Depends on how
understand-
popular you are. I mean,
No, I don't think it's how popular we are, it's how popular the ice cream is.
It's all about the ice cream.
I mean, if you put fish food on there or some Ben and Jerry's attractive, then I could see it being $2,500.
Everyone gets their own pint.
Yeah, the little pints.
No,
Those little, give away those little ones, but,
just trying to include like advertising costs and everything, which is
Yeah, there you go, advertising.
and same thing with the coffee, and, I like the idea of the dog leashes and special dog leashes, and when it comes to water bottles, it's hard to give away our swag bags to begin with for public comment when people come in. So, I don't know, they're all listed on there as well, but, putting a couple of them together, because everybody's gonna have a different idea to come talk to a council person about, or talk to a representative about. So, for instance, if we were to do something with the dogs and the leashes, along with the ice cream together. I don't know, maybe combine a couple of these. Because like I say, some of these people are gonna have different ideas for heading their topics. And you say, yeah, you hit the right buzzer, because here's a special dog leash for you.
I don't know if you need a dog leash.
I'm just,
Yeah.
something along the line of, we'll probably get a lot of people talking about pets and hiking trails and how they get run over by the mountain bikes, or,
That's for
you
sure,
know,
they're
or
insured.
we're gonna get a
Got
lot
on
of people
Saturday.
complaining about different things, right?
You do.
Yeah, and that's the idea, is
That's
you
the
get to
idea.
hear it, and then hopefully you hear a couple compliments, and it's just that chance to reach out, because people don't want to come here, and if you liked, Councilor Matson's idea of going there, we could identify an ice cream thing, we could identify a coffee thing,
Right.
and work on a Thursday night, maybe get the last Thursday night concert of this year, and some other time. But if we just want to make sure that you're up to speed on it and you're okay with it, and then if we ended up getting 3 of you, I think that would be a minimum, just so that at least the majority of the council hears the points. We can set some of these up and see how they work.
So versus the table in the mall, could we do what they did for the grind?
Yeah.
Have a special area, kind of a
Sure.
pub tent? Of course, we
Oh,
should.
have a tent up on the hill?
Yeah.
On the hill.
We could have a dunk
Sure we
tank, right, and then people, that'll get people here, right?
Great idea.
Oh,
Done.
oh, what?
One of
Okay,
those dunk
all in
tanks,
favor?
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Welcome,
You don't
council
answer the
member.
question right, I'm gonna dunk you. Oh,
We'll be sure to do that in January.
yeah,
Well, I think you've got it, this is a good start.
yeah.
I think these are all really good ideas.
They're really
It's just-
great ideas. I like them.
But I think maybe Friday afternoons on the mall, since we have that going on. Wherever we have stuff going on already, rather than trying to create something to get people to come to, I think we'll have more success with.
Bill, have you been up there on Friday afternoons to see what kind of activity there's going about? I haven't, so I'm curious as much as anything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's some vendors and there's some activity.
Okay.
Not a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean,
It's small.
it's the mall. It's just, it's Snowmass, so it just depends upon what's going on.
It's-
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is, by advertising that we're doing something on a Friday afternoon, do you think we're getting more people than would just be naturally around there anyway?
I don't know.
Let us figure out where we got crowds already, and if you're okay with that concept, we'll set up 1 or 2, see how it works, and we'll adjust from there.
Okay.
Should we be doing this at the same time we have the election season going on, or should this come afterwards? Because if you're running for political office, you're already doing a lot of stuff and doing, I assume, meet and greets and what have you. And this could be a substitute, could be considered a substitute. I'm just asking, so so we're not confusing. The community and the town is paying for candidate.
Ice cream.
Campaign?
Just-
Yeah.
Well, one thought, Marky, just is that this seems like it would happen before anyone would start to get into really campaigning,
Yeah.
right? In the month of August and early September, and then you're done.
Yeah, it's 27th, I believe. I wrote you all an email a couple weeks ago. I think it was the 27th is the last day petitions are due.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, let's try and get one of these done before then.
I think it's a
Because-
great idea.
And then after that, we can
Yeah,
evaluate.
we'll try it out.
You might try inviting specific neighborhoods. We're gonna hear the concerns of Horse Ranch on this day and date. Come and have a cup of coffee or ice cream, whatever you wanna do, rather than just anybody. Maybe you kinda get some, I don't know, commonality of what you're kinda setting an agenda by your geographic, we wanna hear from the Pines. I mean, the Horse Ranch might be more of something that's not in the high season, and the high season would be for neighborhoods that
A good idea.
are more occupied during the high season, and then the more year-round, we want to hear from Mountain View right before their leases get renewed.
Okay, I think you've got a good start and looking forward to what you come up with.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, and next item is reports and actions. Tom?
I have a core meeting on Thursday morning, so nothing's changed from our standpoint at this point.
Tomorrow is a celebration of an anniversary, I think, could it be 50 years, the Rudai Reservoir and Rawapa, Rudai Water and Power Authority, believe it or not, 50 years old. And tomorrow's a celebration that I'm going to up on the reservoir.
Oh, fun.
Looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Bill, you have anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the RAFTA board meeting last week. Several items. The e-bike issue. We had hoped to have some consistency for the entire Rio Grande Trail. That was the resolution, to only allow Class 1 bikes. It did not pass. So what did pass was Emma up through Pitkin County will be a Class 1. Down Valley will be Class 1 and 2s. So increase in enforcement, if you will, on the Emma up to Aspen.
So were there a lot of people with Class 2 bikes down Valley? Is that the
Yes.
issue?
Yeah, quite a few, and there were, unfortunately, we did not collect data on crashes or people winding up injured with being hit by a Class 2 bike or what. You can get hit with a Class 1 or a plain old bike.
E-bikes got hit by buses.
So we were unfortunately not consistent. There was a grant application for clean air buses and hybrid buses, four diesel hybrid buses and 4 new 45-foot clean diesel commuter coach buses, and this is going into the federal government. It's an FTA grant that was supported. The Lova Trail, RAFTA did commit to about $15,000 to move that project forward. It's moving very rapidly. For those of you who like to ride down in that neck of the woods, that'll connect. The Lova is a lower valley, and it goes from Glenwood Springs all the way to Newcastle. It'll be a beautiful, beautiful trail, but boy, is it pricey.
It's a paved bike path?
Not yet, but it will be.
That's the plan?
It's the plan. As you come out of Glenwood Springs, it's paved until you start into South Canyon.
So the trail exists now?
It's,
Is
it's-
it gravel the rest of the way, or?
yeah, it's gravel right now. It's what people say, don't ride, because it's so unsafe as you go down through South Canyon, and you have to kind of pick your way. It's what several people from Newcastle reported. Now the important thing is destination, the 2040 update. So a few things that occurred at the RAFTA meeting, was a pretty lengthy meeting, is number one, the assessment rate for property values. The state just published that it's 6.11%, and what you saw at the last meeting when they were here was over 7%. I don't remember what the number was, but it's 6.11. The board did support a 2.65 mill levy. A lot of discussion on this 2.65 or 2.55 or 3.65. But we all landed on 2.65. So what that means for per 500,000, $500,000 of actual home value, it's $6.75 per month, or basically $81 per year. That's pretty darn cheap, about 240 bucks, depending on where you sit in terms of the valuation of your house. So now we're starting to work on ballot language. There will be a task force that will be looking at the ballot and the public outreach. Everyone's going to get, remember that cute little pamphlet they handed out, that 2040? You're going to be getting a revised one, and it was supposed to come out maybe, probably sometime this week.
This one.
Yes, that one. So the back changed. Yeah, the 131 that was on there.
Right.
So, how much did it have per month? $8 and some odd cents?
That's a 3.65.
Yeah, how much was a half million?
The
month?
500,000 was 130, 140.
Okay, now you're down to $80.95. So, there you go. Let's see, what else did we talk about? Those are the biggies. And of course, as I said earlier, there is a special meeting already planned to work on the ballot language. So, let me know what you think about the community outreach that is just gearing up.
Oh, on the ballot,
On the ballot language.
for the
Mhm.
update?
Yeah, because most people,
I'm
the
sorry.
last poll that you saw here from Ralph Trapani, most people didn't even know that there was a ballot initiative
Yep.
coming. And I don't know what's happening at the state level, if the transit tax will or will not go on the ballot. Do you know?
I haven't heard anything in the last week, I don't know. I assume so, but I don't know that.
So that was it from RAFTA. Anything
So
else?
quickly, on that change, on the 2.65, were all those things, the do's and don'ts that were gonna be included, stay the same?
Mm-hmm. We saw the 2.65 in terms of the laundry list.
Right,
And that laundry list was maintained as well. We go
They
in.
didn't reprioritize anything on there.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
That wasn't included in their
Nope.
packets, that was just projected.
The Snowmass, the improved in terms of connected, that stayed on the list.
Yeah, and the
There's
transit center?
there's one item that we might find, well, there's probably several, but one is the pedestrian crossing at Buttermilk has partially been included, $500,000, so stay tuned. And the Lova Trail was also included for Garfield County. So, I don't know, timber zone against pot shops and, I don't know, okay, fine. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. You have a second? Thank you, Bill. All in support?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll be out of here by 6.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Good work,
You going
team.
away?
No, no, I got my granddaughter just showed up today.
Oh, that's right.